Good evening, everyone. I'm Alex Selfand. Welcome to another Salty Dog webinar. And tonight's sort of a complimentary webinar to what we talked about last night, where we heard from Predict Wind and how to use their tool set. And Ted Grant, who's a longtime Salty Dog member and cruiser and has been to the Caribbean a number of times. We've sailed with them. Um, Volunteered to give a webinar from his perspective about managing the weather and routing and how to make some of the decisions that you're going to have to make in order to have a safe passage and enjoy the cruising that you're about to be doing. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Ted. And again, all your questions go into the chat box and we'll get to them at the end. Ted, it's all yours.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you for that. Good evening, everybody. As Alex said, Grant, and I will let the first cover slide speak for itself there. It's always a question: are we going to go? Are we going to stay? We want to go out there, but we don't want to get beat up too bad. Everybody's got uh, their own criteria for what's acceptable weather to get out there. The main thing is we want to know what it is we're going into. About me, why should you listen to me? Well, maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. I'm a physicist and engineer by training. I've been sailing for over 50 years. I started off sailing dinghies on lakes in upstate New York, and little by little, I became a coastal cruiser and then an ocean cruiser. Being a physicist and engineer, a lot of my friends say I'm on the spectrum, to which I say, hey, it's a spectrum. We're all on it. So if you, hopefully you won't find my method here too pedantic. We made our first Caribbean passage in 2019. It was not with the Salty Dogs. It was the ARC Caribbean 1500. We had a Beneteau Oceanus 45 named Grace. At that time, well, as far as weather goes, I was an idiot. We had what we thought was going to be a lot of support from the organizers of that. Having been in both the ARC and the uh, Salty Dog rallies, I'll tell you that you get a lot more support in Salty Dog. We had an Iridium Go, and we would get a short weather text. Well, it was more than a text, but it was something like a paragraph or two of text that just told us about the weather in the segment we were in. There was no routing guidance, and I was using Predict Wind via the Iridium Go. That was kind of the start of the state of the art at that time. Things have changed a lot, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it would take us, if I was lucky to get one weather set for Predict Wind, maybe 20 minutes with the Iridium connecting and reconnecting and trying to download information. And it was just kind of a constant nightmare to try to get our information. Um, when and we made a lot of mistakes on that. We wound up going through some weather we didn't have to, but it's actually a very light weather year at that time, and so we wound up taking a lot longer than we could have if we had been smarter on our weather. In late 21, or actually early 22, we swapped our Beneteau for a Leopard 45, and we took off for the Bahamas and east coast of the United States during the summer of 22. At that point, we had Predict Wind. We used a cell phone. We had some Chris Parker emails, and being pretty much coastal in the Bahamas, we didn't need anything higher uh, higher speed or more powerful on our internet connection. When we took off on the Salty Dog rally in 2022, we had Starlink. Starlink was new then. I was actually questioning whether or not we should get one. Actually, excuse me for just one moment, folks. I'll be right back. All right, sorry everybody. I have a house full of grandchildren trying to get them to quiet down a little bit. So the Starlink at that time was very new. It was very questioned whether we should have it or not. So some of us did, most didn't. Fortunately, we did. at that point with Starlink, you had unlimited for pretty cheap, and we paid $1.50 a month, I think, and even across the ocean, it was wide open. Since then, they've restricted and I think opened up somewhat. I don't know what the current plans are, but anyhow, we had Chris Parker. We had Chris Parker's guidance uh, through the Salty Dogs. We also had a plan with him, and the bottom line is we felt a lot more confident by the time we learned what we learned over the last couple of years and through that. And then the winter of 24, we spent in the Bahamas. And then last year we sold our boat. Here's an overview of what I'm going to cover today. A little bit on weather fundamentals. I'm not going to try to teach you weather. And let me just say that I many of you may know more about weather than I do. My goal is to get you from where I was uh, when I was a complete idiot in 2019, maybe to somewhere as being well on the way down here. You may be ahead of me. You may know things that I already know. So if I insult anybody's intelligence, please forgive me. We're going to go over the weather fundamentals, uh, a little bit about models. What is a weather model and what are the different models? Talk about things that are the sources of actual current conditions, forecasts, what the model differences are, things you have to watch out for the models don't do very well, and then some app and website recommendations for me, recommendations on onboard equipment, how to put this all together to forecast your own weather, and then where you might go if you want to learn more. And then finally, I'm going to ask for some feedback on what I've given you and what you might want if this is enough. Okay, weather fundamentals. Um, Again, probably everybody knows this, but the bottom line is that the big thing is that uh, wind moves from high pressure to low pressure. Just like if you squeeze your lungs, the pressure in your lungs is high, air comes out your mouth. You would think that it might go straight. It doesn't because of something called the Coriolis effect. I'm not going to go into that. I will tell you I'm a physicist and I have a hard time with it myself. But the bottom line is kind of like the earth is turning under the force of the wind. So what happens is the winds circle around highs clockwise and outward, and they circle around lows counterclockwise and inwards. Fronts form kind of like spokes of a wheel out from the lows. You get fronts and troughs. Fronts are always troughs. Troughs aren't always fronts. So a trough is a superset of a warmer and cold. One good way to think about it is that highs, since they're pushing air out, they push bad weather out, and lows suck it in. An example of this is the Bermuda high. And if most people, including myself, before making a trip to the Caribbean, would sort of assume, hey, the smart way to go would be to go down the coast of the United States to Florida and through the Bahamas and down to the Dominican Republic and to the Virgin Islands. That's where you would go. If you got a little experience, then you know, no, that's not great. And the reason it's not great is because that Bermuda high is a persistent high pressure region over the Atlantic that brings the winds like this. And once you get down here a little bit, you wind up just beating your way into stiff headwinds the entire way down. Some people have done it who I've talked to. It typically takes weeks and weeks as you try to get down there and hide in certain places to get out from the wind. Whereas what we tend to do is to go and ideally what will happen is you go about a 45-degree angle down, go southeast from the mouth of Chesapeake. And it isn't, believe me, it's never always this simple, but if the prevailing wind holds, you're sort of going on a broad reach against those winds of the Bermuda High. By the time you get out here, generally the pattern does hold, and then you hang a right on the 64th longitude or I-65, 64, and it's a broad reach on the way down. Again, it's not that simple and things change a lot, but that's the reason why we don't go down here is we don't want to fight that prevailing winds of the circling around the Bermuda High. That Bermuda High is also the cause of the trade winds. So down here, we tend to have pretty good winds on the 15 to 25 knot range all the time, certainly in the winter. In fact, you can probably right now forecast the weather down here with about 80% accuracy to say that the weather in January, February is going to be uh, highs in the high 80s, lows in the high 70s, the wind from the east at 15 to 20, with occasional squalls. There you go, 80% right. And I didn't mention, but a lot of times this path down through here is called the thorny path because it is pretty rough. Okay, what is a weather model? So a weather model is a simulation of the atmosphere. You take the entire area that you're covering. It could be the entire globe or a global model. It could be a smaller area. You divide it into cells that are some width and height and in latitude and longitude and some height in the atmosphere. Each one of those cells has a state, which is a combination of its temperature, its pressure, the humidity content, and things like that. And then you apply the laws of physics to each one of those things and move the time scale ahead, delta t, which could be an hour, could be 3 hours, depends on the model, and figure out what the state is going to be at each one of those spots in, let's say, 1 hour. And you do it again for the next hour, and the next hour, and the next hour. And you go out and you propagate that out as far as the model will go. Usually models will go something on the order of 7 to 10 or 15 days. And that's because it doesn't make much sense to do it after that. The models, when you propagate these physical laws forward, it becomes more and more uncertain. And it becomes so uncertain that 10 or 15 days it's not even worth doing it. I might note that these things, it's really, really expensive to develop these models. And it's really computationally intense to run them. As a result, it's generally government organizations that do it. Like we have the NOAA, uh, I don't remember what NOAA stands for, but the National Weather Service is part of NOAA that does it in the United States. In Europe, there's a European organization that does it. The UK has one. There's some other ones. There are some private ones. Um, it takes a big computer, the most powerful supercomputers in the world, run these models, and it takes an hour to run them. So they don't do it every 10 minutes. They'll do it typically a couple of times a day to update the models. And then when you look at all the sources of information we're actually looking at, all the apps and websites that you're looking at, like Predict Wind and all the other ones, they are all pulling this publicly available data and processing it in some way to display it. Very few organizations are running their own models. Almost everybody is pulling the big government models like the GFS and the ECWMF. Okay, to have a simulation, uh, if you're going to take the state of all of these cells in the world and figure out they're going to be like in another hour or 2 hours or 72 hours or whatever it be, you got to start somewhere. So one of the key things is that the people who set up the models have to have initial conditions. They have to know what the temperature is, what the wind is, what the pressure is, all these different spots. So where these things come from is a variety of places. There's ground stations. You know, every airport has a thing that's telling you what the temperature and the wind speed and the humidity is. Um, in the ocean, we have buoys out there that do this. They report that back by satellite. We have weather radars in the continental United States. We're spoiled for choice. The entire continental United States is covered by next gen radars. There's so many of them that if one of them drops out, the same area is covered by other radars. And every 90 seconds, each one of those things give us the full state of the precipitation and everything else that a radar can detect around that. The NOAA releases radiosondes, which are things that are little weather balloons that have a little transmitter on them, and it's allowed to ascend through the atmosphere so we know what the speed of the winds aloft are and what the temperatures are aloft and weather moisture states up there. We have the ASCAT satellite radar. That's again a U.S. Government radar system, and they actually scan the oceans, and they are clever enough that they can look at the return from the radar hitting the ocean and determine sea state. Um, that is a picture of a typical ASCAT scan. You'll notice it doesn't blanket the whole ocean. It's got stripes in there. You can zoom in on this to get some more detail, but like where we're typically looking is the Caribbean, you see there's like basically two stripes that might apply on any given day. This passes twice a day, so you don't have continuous updates on that. There is continuous satellite infrared information, which is quite useful. We can see a lot of clouds and cloud temperatures from that. There are lightning detector networks. There are vessel observations, which are difficult to incorporate on a big basis. One interesting thing going forward is that Predict Wind is using the data hubs. A lot of us are encouraged to get a data hub on our boat, and they're able to collect all the data from all of our boats. So there's a whole network of additional bit of information there. And I think it's early days yet, but Predict Wind may be able to get us some really good uh, updates to their models and being able to use that information and put it in there. A couple of notes. I said that there's weather radars, good weather radars all over the continental United States. In the Caribbean, not so much. Um, there's one in the Bahamas. I have tried many times to see the weather uh, radar from the Bahamas and never been successful. I don't know if it's frequently down or just the interface is bad or whatever, but stuff. You do sometimes see, like if you go to an app like My Radar or other places, you see things that, like My Radar. Um, I love My Radar, I use it all the time. You would think you're looking at radar here, but you're not. And what they're actually doing is they're using the satellite data uh, to see cloud top temperatures. And so you can kind of infer from that if the temperatures are cold, then they can infer that there's convective activity going on there. The thing I don't like about My Radar is it just pushes that all together. You would think that it is a radar, but it's not. They're not saying it's radar when it's satellite. But anyhow, that's how that works. So one of the reasons I mentioned this is because I think it's important when we go look and do our own forecast to understand what really is happening right now. And these are the sources that we can look at to see what's happening in our part of the world at the moment in recent history. This is a typical forecast from NOAA. This is from the Ocean Prediction Center. And you will see here a couple of things. First thing I point out is up here, it tells you this is the 96-hour forecast. It tells you when it was issued and when it's valid. So it's valid approximately 96 hours from when it was done. This forecast actually, I pulled this several days ago, and it's for right now, actually. And you'll also note that there's the forecaster, the person who did it. This is actually the name of a person at NOAA who did this forecast. And you'll notice that it shows the isobars, the lines of constant pressure, and it shows highs, it shows lows, it shows winds in certain places. It shows fronts. A cold front is blue, a warm front is red, a stationary front is a combination of the two. It shows troughs. I'm going to now jump to a similar time frame. This is actually from Predict Wind, which probably a lot of you would recognize. And this is both the wind picture that I think we tend to look at a lot. I know I do. And this is the isobar picture. So you'll actually notice, I'm going to flip back and forth. You see, coming off of Newfoundland down to Hatteras, there's a front there. You can kind of see something going on here. But where's the front? Where's the troughs? Where's the lows? They're not labeled. Um, and the reason is because those things are drawn by human forecasters. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. That is beginning to change a little bit, but for the most part, those things humans have to do it. I'm going to flip to a moving picture of this and notice what happens as time goes on here. Right along here, you can see that front moving along. That's your cold front. So now it's paused. A couple of things you might notice. Um, in the way Predict Wind shows it, so you've got your winds on the left-hand side, you've got your isobars on the right, with some winds in it. And it shows precip in there also. So this is more or less valid right now. So one thing you probably would notice is you don't want to be off of Hatteras right now. Not only is it blowing pretty hard, but it's blowing from the north, and that's going to be right into the Gulf Stream, which is going to cause some nasty waves. You do not want that. All right, onward. Um, there's all these different models. There's GFS, GHCMF, there's HRRR. and the UK Met, and there's I think probably a dozen different models. What are the differences? Why would you want one or the other? Um, I what I'm always hearing is, oh, compare all the models, and if they're similar, you know that your forecast is good. Which I say, okay. Here's an example. Again, I took this 4 days ago, and you see that they agree pretty well for the first couple of days, and they widely diverge. Well, I don't have the luxury of saying, okay, well, we're just not going to worry about this. So I'm on a passage. I'm going to be out there for 2 weeks. I need to make some guesstimate of what to do. So I'm going to tell you my recommendation. Everybody make your own choices. Um, the HRRR, that stands for High Resolution Rapid Refresh. This is the highest resolution, shortest time step model there is for the continental United States. It's only for CONUS and a little bit offshore, and it only goes for 3 days. So my recommendation, if you can use that, then use it. Once you get off the coast, you can't use it anymore. It doesn't go out that far. If you're looking out more than 3 days, you can't use it. Other than that, I say stick with the ECMWF and the GFS. So generally speaking, it's acknowledged that the European model is the better model. Kind of pains me as an American to think that we don't have the better model, but that's the way it is. So what I always do is use those two and compare them and sort of say, well, do I believe this one or that one? And it kind of gives you a pretty good guess of what range yourself around. Um, just a quick review of some of the other models. The NAM, I forget what that stands for, but it's kind of like the HRR. When it's older, the HRR is newer and better. I wouldn't bother with the NAM. These other ones, gosh, they may have some good aspects, but I don't know. And you have to simplify. So again, as I said, I just focus on those two. PW and PWG, Predict Wind knows them. They're proprietary. They say they're enhanced. Um, I have not had good experience using them, and so I don't. I think that it's going to watch out in the future as we see what happens with the use of the data hubs. They may have a pretty good leg up on those. IBM has a model called Graph. I don't know of any way to access that in a way that makes sense to me to use. They do sell that to a lot of the weather services, your kind of commercial weather channel kind of stuff like that. And another interesting thing is coming along is the AI models. Google has one called Weather Next. I understand it's actually quite good. I have not seen it in action. As far as I know, I don't see an interface where we can use it. I think that it's early days for that. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. They are not simulations or simulations. Sorry, they use a completely different thing, some kind of AI pattern matching. I don't know what it is. It's some sort of AI magic. It's apparently getting really good reviews from the weather techies and so on. Um, right now, I think it's not ready for prime time, but something to watch out for. It'd be very interesting in the future. Okay, a couple of things to watch out for that models don't really do a great job of. Thunderstorms is one, and wind near land, especially tall islands, is another one. Thunderstorms, as you probably know, can be kind of nasty, and the reason for this is because a strong thunderstorm brings rain down so fast it moves the air with it, which creates a downburst. Um, Assuming everything is moving, then well, think rain when it's not moving. This is just coming straight down, and then the wind would go out equally in all directions. If it is moving, what happens is that the wind on the front side um, is equal to the downburst speed plus the speed of the general wind going through. So if the winds are going 15 knots, you're getting a downburst that creates a wind of 20 knots, and you're going to get 35 knots on this side, but only 5 on this side because it's some drop. Um, when it comes to squall lines, this is a product of fronts and troughs. You pretty much can't really avoid those. If a front comes through, you're going to have to hit it. The other kind of thunderstorm happens one by one. You get random cells that occur when the atmosphere is unstable, and that happens when there's heating and a lot of moisture in the air. They're pretty hard to predict. Um, I'm always interested in watching what Chris Parker has to say about these. He has some interesting. Um, ooh, all right. Excuse me, folks. I need to take one more moment again. I see my computer is about running out of juice. I'll be right back. All right. Well, that's embarrassing. Terribly sorry, folks. Um, I myself have not really figured out how to tell how likely thunderstorms are when I'm out away from good sources of weather information. You'll see in predict wind, there's something called CAPE, which is convective available potential energy. If that number gets above 4,000, that sort of indicates a higher probability. There's other ways to do it. Like I said, I've not been real successful. I think that when it's hot and humid, then you've always got the possibility. Um, I am going to mention one technique that I found that I think is quite useful, which is to look out for them. Um, and it is actually possible to avoid them. Again, going back to my first trip to the Caribbean, being an idiot, we just thought, well, squalls happen. If you get hit, you get hit. That's all there's to it. After a little bit of time out there, I began to understand that, oh, you actually have a chance of missing them. And what you can do is use your weather radar. So what we do on watches is that every 15 minutes, somebody looks at the weather radar, sees if there's any squalls out there. And if there is, you do your best to establish a track on it. You can do it just like you would a ship or another boat. Get the radar to start a track on that. It'll tell you the direction it's moving and the speed. And you use your avoidance algorithm. Like I know that when we did it we had a Ray Marine, and so you can set up a track against something else, and it will tell you what direction you should steer if you want to intercept it. Well, that tells you the direction you don't want to steer. And it's oftentimes possible to get an isolated squall and track it well enough to steer around it. Like if something like this is happening, you probably want to turn toward it a little bit. And you often find maybe a 20 or 30 degree diversion for a few hours will get you to miss a squall. It works best if the squalls are well defined. They aren't always. Sometimes they'll all bush around. It doesn't track very well, so it doesn't work all the time. I kind of find about a 2 out of 3 chance of being able to miss squalls that way. By the way, the same radar picture here shows a line of squalls. If this was coming at you, obviously you're not steering around that. You're just stuck with that. The other thing that it doesn't do very well is land, um, especially tall islands. Everybody knows that you're going to have wind, which is much lighter on the leeward side of some piece of land. Um, and this effect is really magnified when you have very tall islands. When you get down island to places like Dominica, these islands can be 3 or 4 thousand feet tall. They're so tall they have different climate at the top. They squeeze moisture out of them. Uh, but typically the forecast is just going to show the wind going over this if it wasn't there. But the first time we in one of these passages between islands down there, it looked like the wind was coming directly from the east, and we just decided first to go north. And as we came towards the north end of the island, it's like we had to trim the sails tighter and tighter and tighter keep on course. And I thought the wind was shifting. I didn't realize it was just a feature of the islands. And then we got across to near the other island, and then we had to let the sails out. So we went from was a beam reach to as close haul as we could in here, and then over here we went out to the beam reach again here, and then a very broad reach. The better way to do that is you just when you start to feel like you have to tighten the sheets, don't just fall off, and then you can keep more or less a beam reach and me on the other side. it will shift again. You can again keep on beam reach, keep your speed up, and not have to turn the sails as you go along. The other thing that happens is that um, close to the islands, you get a big disruptive effect of the wind. So if you want to go by the island, you want to keep moving, get a little bit downwind of it so that you get past this effect. If you are close to it, be aware that you will probably have very little wind, or maybe even reverse wind. We had some fun in Fort de France in 2023. We really wanted to be there for Carnival, and we wanted to be right in the middle of parties. We were at the Fort de France, and it was right downwind of some big hills and a big fortress there. And although the wind was blowing a good 15 to 20 on the outside, in there it was 0 to 5 in all directions. And we wound up again and again with boats. Boats were packed in there pretty tight. Everybody wanted to anchor in the same spot. And we wound up several times stern to stern with other boats that were so close we had to push each other off. Everybody's going every which way. Okay, on to the apps and the websites. There are literally over 10,000. There are so many things out there. Uh, I do want to emphasize all of them get their data from the same place. It's those same couple of models that have been given to us by the grace of some big government organizations, and they're all following them. And it doesn't take a whole lot to uh, to create a program which goes and pulls data from a big database and to put in some visualized pattern. And so that's why there's so many of them. I have found that a lot of the consumer apps um, are really beautiful or cool or do something, but there can be kind of confusing. Like I mentioned, the My Radar program, which conflates radar with satellite infrared. One of my other favorites is AccuWeather, which, in my personal opinion, is very precise, but it's not very accurate. If you look at that thing, it's always telling you that it's going to start raining in 17 minutes. But if you watch it over the course of a half an hour, it says it's going to be 17 minutes. Well, that turns out to be, let's say, 12:17, and then 5 minutes later it says it's going to be 5 minutes. Then it's the bottom line is that it's bouncing all over the place. They give you this number, very precise to make you think that it's very accurate, but it's not. It's actually misleading. What it really comes down to is what you need is websites and software and apps that work for you, things that you like the way that it speaks to you, makes sense to you, and you get some experience with it, and you get confidence that it's going to help you. So again, there are a zillion things to do out there. I'm sure everybody's got their favorites. I'm just going to tell you what I use and what I might recommend that you start off from if you're dumber than I am. If you're smarter than me, then let me know what you use. So the first thing is NOAA. NOAA has lots of good stuff. Um, Everything from local forecasts to upper level weather and winds aloft and aviation weather. The Ocean Prediction Center in particular is very good for those synoptic forecasts, like the one I showed earlier. It shows what the situation is like on the Atlantic Ocean. Predict Wind, I couldn't imagine operating without Predict Wind. Um, and one nice about them is they have the offshore version, so you can download your data. You don't need a persistent connection to do that. Uh, one other little program I like is called, it's like a web page from Colorado State, which shows infrared images. I'll show that in a moment. Live Lightning this is a German company. I think Blitz is Lightning. Blitz or tongue. Uh, there's a network of stations out there. I think they pull a lot from ships. A good kind of general site I like for the areas where we cruise is Tropical Tidbits. And if you're in the Bahamas, Mohammed Bob is kind of an interesting little site. I'm going to flip over now, actually, and show you some sites. So this is the Colorado State. uh, infrared, the satellite infrared. And remember what I was saying before that you can kind of use hopefully this will start refreshing properly in a moment here, um, that you can use cloud temperatures to kind of infer what's happening as far as precipitation goes. And this is what they're doing. This is a display Chris Parker uses a lot. It's something that's available for free. I like it. Um, this is the Blitzortung, and where there's lightning, there's thunderstorms. So this is a really good way to know what's happening out there uh, in right now in the recent history as far as convective activity. Tropical Tidbits has a lot of different information, and I'm just going to sort of hack your way through that if you're interested. And then Barometer Bob, I think is kind of a quirky little thing from the Bahamas, and there's a lot of information that he's got on his website that's local weather. And one of the good things that they do in here is to review the conditions at the inlets, like in the Abacos and places. All right, so let me reshare presentation. Okay. And then I'll mention a couple of apps that I like. Like I said, I like my radar a lot. Um, these other couple of ones that I mentioned here, windy.app. By the way, there's two apps named Windy. One is windy.app and the other one is windy.com. And Ventusky, which is a Polish app. They include fronts and troughs. You might remember that I said before that fronts and troughs and highs and lows are drawn by human beings. Uh, but then you might think that, golly, with all this advancement in being, looks like I've paused my sharing.
No, you're still sharing the websites.
Okay, so let's try to, okay, sorry, folks. All right, now I'm probably showing nothing. Alex, is that true?
Correct.
Okay, okay. And now I'm back to sharing the presentation.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, really sorry, folks. So I was mentioning these apps, talked about my radar. Um, as I was trying to say that although generally speaking, human beings are the ones drawing those lines for the fronts and the troughs and the highs and lows. It would seem that with all these advancements in big data and algorithm analysis and AI, that should be done automatically. Obviously, the apps that are doing this can't afford to hire an army of meteorologists to draw those lines for them. What they're doing is they're doing what computers do well, which is to go grab data and to process it. It would seem that you should be able to process that data, the isobars and the pressures and the winds to figure out where there are troughs and fronts. And so they're starting to do that. And these two are the one that I know that have it. It's experimental, it's pretty quirky. It's kind of funny. You can look at it and see the drawn front doesn't really match what's obviously the front from the wind directions. But it's again interesting stuff. I think will be helpful as we all right. Uh, Equipment to have on board. Um, Here's what I would recommend is that I would certainly say have Starlink. I don't know what the plans cost right now. Like I said, when we first did it, you could watch Netflix the whole way across. It wouldn't cost you a nickel more. I know that then they went into a phase where once you got offshore, it cost something like $2 for 50 gigs. So you want to shut off all the crews on Netflix. But I think you absolutely need to have that for your weather information. Highly recommend it. Um, and then just manage the use so that not getting spending too much money on it. Something very new that I think everybody should have is satellite capable cell phones. Most modern cell phones now will let you talk directly to the satellites when you're out of reach of land cells. Um, I know that we ran into it on our phone, just we happen to be out of coverage and it just popped up and you can use it. Maybe it costs $10 a month. It'd be kind of dumb to not have that backup, even though there's not a lot of data throughput on that, because everybody's got cell phones. I would certainly do that. Iridium Go, I think, is another good backup. By the way, I still have mine. It's for sale. A couple of nice things about that is that you do get voice. So you can actually make a phone call. So if you ever got into a situation where you really needed help and your other modes of communication were down, you could call somebody up and ask them to help you. You could call them up and ask them to log on to the Chris Parker podcast or something like that. For the internet, it's tough. Like I said, I never had much luck. It took me forever, 20 minutes to get even like a basic data package. The speed is really slow. It's 2400 baud. You remember the days of dial-up internet with AOL and so on? That was typically something like 19.2 kilobaud. This is 2.4 kilobaud, really slow. Uh, I forgot to write it down here, but Iridium has now created something that they call the Iridium Go Exec, I think. And basically, what they do is they take four Go channels and bind them together, so you get something more like 9.6 kilobaud, which of course is better. There are a bunch of pocket satcoms. I have a Garmin InReach. There's a things called Zoleo, Stick, and other things. Those things you can get decent sized text messages, and so it would be not enough to have actual streaming internet, but I think it's a really good backup to have. Plus, of course, the fact that you get the tracking off of it. So that'd be my sort of recommendation for the basic set. Some other things to consider would be an SSB radio. My personal opinion on that is they're really cool, and I would love to have one, but I'm not willing to do the work to put it onto my boat. They use very long wavelength radio waves, which bounce off the ionosphere, which is how you get uh, beyond line of sight communications with them. In order to do that, you need an antenna that's like uses the whole rig basically as an antenna. It has to be grounded with some strips on the base of the your hull to bond, make an electrical connection with the sea. So to me, it's not worth it. If I happen to get a boat that had it, I would certainly keep it. They sound like a lot of fun. You can actually do data with that also, although it's quirky enough and slow enough. I don't think you can do that anymore. Cell phone data, that's actually really good. I mean, a lot of times, if you're in the Bahamas from Florida, you don't really need to do a satellite. They've got really good cell phone data there, and you're mostly within reach of land in the Bahamas. You just have that period of maybe a day when you're crossing the Gulf Stream, you do without connection. There are carriers. We have T-Mobile. T-Mobile, almost anywhere you go, you get 250K data, which is pretty much good enough to do most things. Google Fi has good connections most places. Local carriers like Bahamas, BTC is pretty good. There are other high-speed telecoms. Um, if you want an alternative to Starlink, Starlink is just a quantum leap better and cheaper than the other stuff. If you had lots of dollars, or if you got a boat that are equipped with something um, like an Inmarsat, you might want to use that. But again, I don't really recommend them. Other stuff you might want to have on the boat, uh, weather radar, highly recommended. I was talking before how you can dodge storms with it. I think that's a really good thing to have. Most people have radar for other reasons, and so use it for the weather. I think that's a good idea. Your seawater thermometer. Uh, Great way to know when you've hit the Gulf Stream and when you've exited it. A barometer. This is something that, this used to be how people foretold the weather, that back in the days of the square riggers, everybody had a barometer, little else to tell them what's going to happen with the weather. Uh, I'll be honest, I bought one. I bought an electric recording one, and I never really got good at using it. Every once in a while, I would go off with an alarm, and I couldn't figure out what the heck is this thing doing. You can get lightning detectors. Again, this is something that, and by the way, an AM radio is a pretty good lightning detector. Just turn it on, you can hear things crackling. There's little devices you can buy that will do it. I didn't have a lot of success with it, but it's something to consider as a possibility. Okay, putting everything together. This is going to sound a little bit like an advertisement for Chris Parker, and it kind of is. But one thing I'd recommend is that you do his webcasts. Get on in the morning and watch the webcast and watch it live. You can get a recording of it afterwards, but if you watch it live, he goes through and or one of his other meteorologists explaining what's happening in the area of interest, the Caribbean, the East Coast of the U.S., whatever you're looking at, and then they take questions. As he goes through the weather, you hear a lot of things descriptive of what's happening out there. Um, I talked about how things like fronts are drawn by humans. I think what's happening when I hear those guys talking is that they're talking in real time. They're looking at it's what's happening in the patterns of what they're seeing in the isobars and the wind patterns, and they know what's a trough, what's a front. Chris has a little expression I always love, which is an impulsive energy. A trough or disturbance is an impulsive energy, which generally means it's going to cause bad weather. The really educational part happens after that. If you are a subscriber of his webcast, you have the right to ask him specifically about what you want to do. Say, hey, I want to leave from Hatteras to go to Florida, and I want to leave sometime in the next couple of days. What we going to have to do? And they'll go and look at the forecast that time and say, well, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and so I recommend you wait until Tuesday. Uh, Obviously, a lot of people, when you're on there, are going to have similar journeys as you, and just hearing the explanation of what each one of these people is recommended to do is really valuable. It helps so much to understand what's happening with the weather. Uh, every time you get on and watch the Chris Parker meteorologist, it's a little class in weather. It's a great thing. If you haven't done much before and you're going to go south this year, if you're going to the rally to Antigua, then start watching now. Get your subscription and start watching every morning. And then for your ongoing process, what I recommend is do more or less what they do, which is go check current conditions so you know what's actually happening out there. Check the buoys, the escats, the airports, the things that are relevant to you, and see what's actually happening out there as far as wind and highs and lows and rain. And then do your own forecast, use your own tools, and then get on Chris Parker's forecast and see how did you do compared to him, and kind of grade yourself. By the way, in the end, it's okay to disagree with him. He's not God. He's kind of a high priest, but he's not God. Um, and one thing I will say about Chris, they tend to be kind of conservative. And like we said at the very beginning, ships are safe in harbor, but that's not what they're meant for. So sometimes I know I have looked at the weather and said, he's kind of recommending against it. I'm going anyhow. And so far, I haven't disappointed myself. Um, if you want to learn more, there is a ton of stuff out there. Like I said, watch his webcasts. He has a textbook available. I bought it. I thought it was really good. There's lots of other weather textbooks out there. There's lots of stuff on the internet. Cruises University at the Indianapolis Boat Show has a class that I took once that was great. And I'll just throw out one last thing, which is that an advanced topic I'm kind of interested in myself. I haven't gotten there yet. Is looking at the upper level weather. And so this is something you'll sometimes see the Chris Parker's people talking about is it helps to infer what's going to happen farther out, instead of just a week out, being able to look out a couple of weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. That's what I have to say. I would ask everybody, give me some feedback. Shoot me an email. Is this worthwhile? Is it worth to me again? Is it redundant with the other things you've gotten as far as weather goes from the other webinars? Was I too deep, too shallow, too fast, too techy? Any mistakes? Need more of something, less of something? And let me know what are your favorite websites and apps. If we're going to do this again, I'd like to get a list and be able to update that and let people know what's good. That's my email. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ted. So, do we have any questions? Chat box has been pretty quiet. I think between what we heard last night and tonight, it's pretty clear that is everyone needs to kind of establish their own method for assessing the weather. Um, I think I agree with Ted. I use Chris Parker all the time, but I also do my own forecasting and analysis, compare what I see, what the tools say to what he says. Um, One thing I did learn is we were trying on one of our return passages from the Caribbean back to the States. The weather was pretty unstable, and we were looking at the Cape, 1 or 2 days out, and trying to figure out, well, can we kind of go through those areas of high Cape and avoid some of the squalls? And Chris said, hey, it's a model, it's it's only a guess is where it's going to be. Um, and that's where, a good weather router is invaluable because there's stuff that the tools by themselves can't tell you. So, any questions? I'm still green, but how do we get to Chris Parker? Okay. Uh, so there's a couple of ways. One is if you're part of the rally, you're going to be getting forecasts from him. I forget when it starts, but fairly soon. If you're not part of the rally, Chris Parker has a website. I don't know if Ted, you had that up there.
I didn't. I'll tell you, you just Google Chris Parker weather. It will come out.
Right,
I think it's
exactly. I think it's
MW,
MWXC or MXWC, I forget. Um, but if you,
MWFC. So it's Marine
right,
Weather Center forecast.
right.
And if I could just chime in, Alex, um, it costs something like $230, I think, for the year to be on his package with the webcast and everything. Um, my personal opinion, it'd be foolish to not spend it. Yes, take advantage of his forecast for the dogs, but get your own thing. If you decide after, do a 6 month package, if you decide after you don't need it, then don't. But if you're, especially if you're green, if you're new to this, take advantage of that. Get a mentor on your staff.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Um, there was another question. Is the weather getting worse overall, or are we just being paranoid? Uh, I don't know what your opinion is. I think it depends on the year. Um,
Well, my what I always say is, as Henry Kissinger once said, even paranoids have real enemies. Uh, So I certainly would say that things we're getting a lot more variability than before. I mean, I know when we uh, went in 2019, it was really light winds, and everybody was saying during that passage, "Oh, this never happens." Um, in As I told you earlier, you can forecast the weather right now in the Caribbean. It's going to be 15, 20 knots from the east. In 2024, 2023, sorry, there was several periods where the Caribbean had several weeks of strong winds from the west, completely unheard of. And everything in the Caribbean is based on being on the leeward side of the islands. So, I mean, there's no place to anchor on the eastern side of any island. So you had winds coming in strong from the west. It was just crazy. So I would say that things are definitely beginning to happen that are different than ever before. It's not necessarily worse. Sometimes it's lighter, it's different, but it's definitely um, harder to say X always happens.
yeah, and we've asked Chris Parker that same question. We were asking him that last year, and I don't. He did not want to commit to say, because of global warming or whatever, that we're seeing significant changes in the weather patterns. I mean, look at this year. I mean, our hurricanes this year have been kind of minimal
Yep.
compared to years past. So, and the summer in Maine was, I think, probably pretty mild compared to some. So it's pretty hard to predict. I will say I agree with Ted about the weather down in the Caribbean. Uh, Come, December, January, it usually blows really hard. Question, if we're part of the rally, do we get access to the Chris Parker webcasts for the month in addition to the routing info? I'm not sure because he's changed his plan a little bit. Um, Suggestion, if you're in the rally, you can pose that question to Kathy Kubik and she can clarify that for you. I'd rather not give out misinformation. All right, any other questions? A couple of folks have said they really liked the presentation, Ted, so good job. All right, if
Thank
that's
you.
the
Although
case,
I will gladly take constructive criticism also.
they'll do that offline. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna stop the recording and remind everyone that there will be a webinar next Tuesday and stay tuned, tune in then. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good night.